Continued, obviously, there will need to be some continued investigation of the nature of what's occurred. We saw, of course, the President and the Secretary note, both of them, that they've been involved, and certainly our Special Envoy, Tom Barrack, is also, of course, the Ambassador to Turkey. And we know at this point, clearly there has to be more investigation into the nature of how this started, but ultimately the discussions have created a dynamic where the Syrians have withdrawn, Israel has not continued, that has ceased, and of course there continue to be skirmishes. This is a rivalry between the Druze and the Bedouins that's, I think, 400 years old. This is, though, one of those challenges that, if perhaps confronted in the modern age with new possibilities of living together, that is the kind of thing we now know must be addressed. So we've had some success. You heard in my topper the Secretary's continued optimism, and Ambassador Barrack, of course, is returning and will be involved. And of course, I can tell you also that we unequivocally condemn the violence that has unfolded there. All parties must step back and engage in meaningful dialogue that leads to a lasting ceasefire. Of course, we know those lines from various other locations, but we also have committed to them, and we engage with them as we are also in this case. Over the last 48 hours, the United States has led the diplomatic efforts to promote real de-escalation and peace. We are actively engaging all constituencies in Syria to navigate toward calm and continued discussions on integration and a stable, more prosperous future for Syrians. And that continues. That has been the mission of Envoy Barrack, and it remains the mission of President Trump and Secretary Rubio. All right. Yes, ma'am. Humaira.
Hi, Tammy. I just want to understand, my colleagues asked about this yesterday, but did you guys get to the bottom of the misunderstanding that Secretary Rubio talked about yesterday? We see it in a different wording again today in Ambassador Barrack's tweets or post. Confusion. What was this misunderstanding, and did the U.S. government intervene in a way to assure that this misunderstanding will not happen going forward again?
You seem a little skeptical, but I don't know if I know some people at home can see some of the reporters here in the first two rows.
I guess that's a prerequisite in this job.
Yes, perhaps it is. But for those who don't know, the language from Ambassador Barrack's tweet: thankful to all sides for their break from chaos and confusion as we attempt to navigate all parties to a more durable and peaceful solution in Syria. And I noted to you already the language from the Secretary. The confusion, as was conveyed to me and was, I think, generally understood, was this ancient rivalry between the Druze and the Bedouins, and violence ensuing. The Syrians moving to that area to quell and stop that violence, and the Israelis who see that occurring to the Druze community and their concerns, then entered what they assessed was something larger than what, or even not what it was at all. I am not a party to the full discussions or to the details of, obviously, of all of these groups and nations and what their choices were. But when the Secretary chose and the President chose to use the word miscommunication or misunderstanding, obviously here now from the Ambassador, chaos and confusion. The good news is, the story is, it stopped. As within the management of that larger conflict, again, there's still skirmishes and other issues that, as we've also noted, the Syrian government is going to have to lead. But obviously there'll be other involvements, but lead into this de-escalation and to the stability. So this is a reminder, and you weren't here, but as I noted to one of your colleagues who asked as well yesterday, that this is a region and certainly a nation that has been unstable, which is why we talk about stability, for generations. There have been rivalries for hundreds of years. We are optimistic people. Humans tend to be that, and our effort is to try to bring this together and to stop it. The answer to whether or not there's hope is the fact that there has been a response, that the parties have acquiesced and are dealing with that response, and that we are committed to seeing this problem that emerged, and now we know what to work on to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. My follow-up to that is related to something that you just said. U.S. is pursuing stability in Syria, as far as I can tell, lifting of the sanctions. And
I promise you that's what we're pursuing.
Right.
Yes.
So does it support Israel carrying out these military operations when it deems necessary?
I can tell you, regarding Israel's intervention and activity, is the United States did not support recent Israeli strikes. We are engaging diplomatically with Israel and Syria at the highest levels, both to address the present crisis and reach a lasting agreement between the two sovereign states. President Trump has outlined his clear vision of a prosperous Middle East and stable Syria at peace with itself and its neighbors. Peace among neighbors, including Israel and Syria, is a critical component of this vision. So I won't speak to future conversations or past ones. What we're dealing with now is this particular episode, what was required, and I think we've been very clear about our displeasure, certainly the President has, and we've worked very quickly to have it stopped. All right, yes, Billy.
Just back to your talk on Syria, you mentioned you condemn...
And let's stick with Syria for a bit while we're in it, just so you know, and then we'll continue on, of course. Go ahead.
You mentioned that you condemn the violence. Are you specifically talking about the Druze Bedouin
all
violence?
All violence. Clearly this started between those two groups. And what we know is that violence erupted, well, is a continuing long issue between those two tribes, and then two major nations began to engage. Obviously, we then engaged, and it stopped. And that is, for me, a very, very proud moment. It's a remarkable situation, being here at the State Department and here at this podium and taking this job, is to be an observer of actions that can be taken that stop what could end up being major, global, horrible issues. And we continue to work on some. We've been successful on others, but it was a very heartening and wonderful to see the work in that regard. So I think that it's the violence in general that appalls the President, that disturbs the Secretary, and it is what we all want, even though we've grown used to it. But it's possible. And if anyone can make it happen, if any country can, it's the United States, and it's the President and it's Secretary Rubio. All right, yes, John.
Can I follow up your answer to the United States not support recent Syrian strikes? Do we say that the United States...
Oh, boy.
Yes,
I know, suddenly the voice of God. Don't want to give me any hints there.
That's always my answer.
Yes, there we go.
Just to get back on you said that the United States opposed the Israeli strikes.
Yes.
Two parts of that. Was there a message beforehand that Israel should not do this, and now going forward, will the U.S. continue to reject Israeli military?
Well, as you know, I won't speculate. I'm not going to comment on what was or was not said prior to the situation that we're dealing with currently, nor will I speculate about... Every situation is different. I'm not going to speculate or guess, none of us should, at what the leaders of our country might do under any other certain circumstance.
Well, just also beginning talking about how Syria, the Syrian government needs to lead a future path.
Yes.
The exact words. But is there a long-term solution? I mean, you mentioned that the United States helped defuse the situation, but is essentially the Syrian forces leaving part of what is part of Syrian territory? Are you seeing a long-term demilitarization? Is that what the U.S.
Well, I know it's about Syria taking the lead in determining the path forward. And so that was a very specific way that it was put. And I can't, I think there's a few people who have an idea of what's possible in what seems to be maybe an impossible situation, but we don't see it that way. And I think that's where new ideas, new solutions can emerge, is when you don't give up to what you think is impossible. So I can't comment on what the strategy would be, what individuals imagine. It is a region that is ancient, and the people are ancient, and it is the modern world, and I think that we now provide a chance, our generations do, to have a different kind of path forward.
Just one more point.
All right.
I mean, one of the points that Israel's making is that there are jihadists involved in this, and that this violence has been against Jews. Is there any concern about linkages potentially between the Syrian government, and is that something the U.S. has seen? Is that something that the U.S. would?
Well, I know that from the beginning, the issue was, of course, working with the new Syrian government on dealing with the problem of ISIS. That's, I think, a unifying dynamic. We know that ISIS has been an issue. We know in that region, my goodness, look at what we've been facing with Iran and state sponsors of terrorism, and what we've all experienced for quite some time. So we know that that has to be part of which I won't preview anything for you because I'm not a part of that team, but we know that that matters deeply to Envoy Barak, and everyone is clear-eyed about what this is. And yet it won't stop them from trying. But the good news is that the good and the bad news is that we have enough history to know what's solvable, what isn't. I recall before President Trump's first term that this idea of getting rid of ISIS as it was moving around the globe, that it was going to be impossible. It would take 30 years. This is just a giant, horrible thing that we would just have to learn to adapt to, but it could never be crushed. President Trump did not believe that and chose to move forward anyway. And I think it was about 18 months, 2 years at the most, and he eradicated ISIS. And so we know that there's in order for something new to happen, you've got to have the idea first. We have that. Again, we're not naive. But we are optimistic. I think that is the history of the American people, and we're going to continue on that. We have good representatives helping us with that as well. Yes, sir.
You said that the US didn't support Israeli strikes. You were asked about any conversations beforehand, but what about afterwards? I mean, Caroline Levitt said that the president called Prime Minister Netanyahu, or they spoke on the phone today, in which he condemned the strike in Gaza. But was that lack of support for the strikes in Syria, was that also conveyed to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't on the call. We were not informed of those details. Caroline had what she chose to share with you, so I won't get ahead of guessing what the conversation was.
Just one other question about, I mean, you've said in the church strike, you've asked Israel to investigate that. Ambassador Huckabee said yesterday that the US had asked Israel to investigate the death of Saif Mossaleh, the Palestinian American who was killed. And yet, in the same 24-hour period, he tweeted that there was a travesty of justice by the, in terms of the investigation of Benjamin Netanyahu. He called them the insanity of out-of-control prosecutors. So I'm just trying to understand how a system that appears that you don't have faith in over the investigation of Mr. Netanyahu is good enough to investigate the deaths of Palestinians.
Well, I would not want to characterize the ambassador's comments, but they were his remarks. If you want him to elaborate on those, you can. What I speak to here is the mission and the statement and the actions that the State Department, the President of the United States has taken, and that the government is taking. And not just these two issues, but our overall view and vision of what's going to be important in the world and how we react to it. So I'm not going to characterize or place the ambassador's comments in any kind of context. Yeah. Well, it's not where I'm going to go. It's not what we're discussing today. All right. Yes, Michelle.
I have a different topic.
Well, do we have any more Syria? All right, we'll come back. So, Michelle, you'll be the start of that? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks. On the path forward and also the long-term solution, which Sean asked you. Do you believe that the only path forward in Syria is that the all constituency or the minority group is to integrate with a centralized government, or have these escalation, the recent escalation, changed your view? And do you think that federalism or some sort of autonomy is a viable solution for the current situation in Syria?
Well, part of starting something like this so new is I don't think it's really ever happened before, is looking at the nature of what works and what doesn't. Clearly, the people of Syria view themselves as Syrians. That is part of, I know, what was discussed earlier, the nature of how you're going to have a government like that and for that nation be able to represent and include everyone. The issue was including them. Of course, every government is going to be, and should be, the decision of how it's formed, the nature of what it represents, should be the decision of the people of that country. But you've got to have a chance to start with the very basics, which is stability, infrastructure, some modicum of peace that you can rely on. And we expect, again, there's been instability. So the stability part you work on and you assess it as it continues, and then you see what needs to be addressed. And that's what we're helping with. So it clearly is going to be up to the Syrian people. But the way that it would work is that because we've seen the history of when everyone is not included, of what can happen. But that is, again, this is where the negotiators, those who are wise enough to be envoys, who delve into this, which is the hardest work in the world, will leave that to people like Ambassador Barak and President Trump and Secretary Rubio.
Yeah,